Next on TCM, Eddie Muller has Noir Alley and a 1951 British film from Hammer Studios starring Robert Preston, Cloudburst, a fitting title since pretty much every day with Eddie is a bit like getting caught without an umbrella in a massive downpour.
Hello again, this is Eddie Muller. I hope you enjoyed your summer under the stars and you're ready to step back into the coolness of the shadows here in Noir Alley. We kick off the fall season by answering those fans who requested a wee dram of British noir. Today's film is Cloudburst, a fascinating post-war thriller from London's venerable Hammer Studios. It was made in 1951, several years before the studio became synonymous with gothic and graphic remakes of American horror movies of the 30s. Cloudburst stars American actor Robert Preston as a World War II cryptologist, a specialist in creating and deciphering coded messages. In the post-war years, as England was trying to build back its movie industry, it was common for British productions to cast American actors as a way of enhancing their film's chances in the U.S. market. Now, this was after Great Britain had imposed onerous taxation on American studios in England, causing a trade war that lasted a few years. In the late 40s, talent and money once again started flowing both ways. A few American actors revived their careers in England, such as Carol Landis, Alexis Smith, and Robert Preston, although none of them dared attempt a British accent. That's why in this film, Preston's character is a transplanted Canadian. Now, plenty of noir films made in America used World War II veterans as characters, usually depicting them either as alienated loners or victims of amnesia. Cloudburst takes a different approach. It shows men who have reassimilated precariously into civilian life. The skills they learned to battle the Nazis, whether it was code cracking or bone breaking, are still percolating just beneath the surface, waiting to be summoned for virtuous reasons or righteous vengeance. Since this film is fairly obscure, I don't want to say too much about the plot. There are some jolts that come out of the blue, and those can be spoiled by describing the motivations of Preston's character, Colonel John Graham. I will say that he shares a unique relationship with his wife, Carol, played by Elizabeth Sellers. Their bond was forged in a German prisoner of war camp, with love letters tapped out in code on the prison walls.
Do you remember that?
Well, this one-of-a-kind setup was the work of writer Leo Marx, who was himself a cryptologist for the British during the World War. He developed a passion for codes and ciphers growing up in his father's bookstore on Charing Cross Road. But when he was conscripted, the military felt he was too much of a misfit for the regular code-breaking unit. He was assigned to head up the SOE, Special Operations Executive, which was described as a mix of geniuses and bungling amateurs. Marx became responsible for deploying agents behind enemy lines after teaching them to communicate with the Home Office through complex ciphers. Often the key words in his ciphers were based on original poems he'd write, making it virtually impossible for the enemy to crack. But this was no game. Agents carried cyanide pills to commit suicide in case of capture, and Marx noted that as many as 50 agents, men and women, died under his command and service to the SOE. Marx funneled all of this background into the script of Cloudburst, which honestly should be called the key word, or cipher, since much of its intrigue comes from the arcane art of cryptology. But don't think this is some sort of John le Carré spy story. Once a major plot twist happens, it becomes hardcore noir, ruthless and brutal, despite the polite manners and stiff upper lips. Directed with some great stylistic flourishes by Hammer workhorse Francis Searle, and featuring a few supporting players familiar to fans of Hammer's later horror shows, here is Robert Preston, a long way from River City, starring in Cloudburst.